You want to be attractive. So some things that are part of you, you're ashamed of. And you think if you share them, then that's bad. That'll make you unattractive and you lose connection. And you're afraid of losing connection. In that moment, you are not connected to the truth that actually being authentic is the best thing you can do in any relationship, of course, because otherwise you take away the chance to be loved the way you are.
When I feel fully nourished, I don't feel like I need so much because I feel like I'm okay the way I am. When I'm in that state, I feel relaxed and I literally, like, not only emotional nourishment, but I notice myself, I'm consuming less. I don't need as much validation from the outside. And when I feel ashamed and when I feel like, oh, fuck, these voices are there and I believe them and I'm like in this contracted state, I feel like I need way more stimulation. I tend to, my addictive patterns tend to show up more. I need more validation from the outside. It's this shameful energy that depletes me in these moments.
So, welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Bypassers podcast with myself, Ashley, Jannick, and Tim. This week, we are diving deep into the emotion of shame, toxic shame, healthy shame, ways that you can work with it, lots of personal shares of how it is showing up in our lives, and how to have more self-compassion to ourselves when this emotion arises its sneaky little head. So, hope you enjoy this episode and see you at the end.
Welcome to the Spiritual Bypassers podcast with Yannick, Ashley, and Tim. Today we talk about the topic of shame and the various ways shame is affecting your life, because little did you know, shame has an impact on your relationship with money, on your relationships in general, to the people around you, and also to the relationship with yourself. We're talking about the root cause of shame, and we talk about one of the antidotes to shame, which is nourishment. And Ashley brought this whole thing up because she is reflecting on that a lot lately. And let's just kick it off by Ashley sharing what she's learning recently.
I enjoy that you can see the future, Tim, of the things that we've talked about already. For the reason the shame's coming up is I'm working with a money coach at the moment. A wealth therapist, actually, is the precise title. I said that to Tim yesterday. He's like, anyone can call themselves a therapist nowadays, and he scoffed a bit and rolled his eyes on the telephone call, which was very valid. And I had to answer many, many questions, like 50 questions by hand, and they were linked to topics around mother, because obviously we also learn this in emotional release. And when you're looking at the nourishment that you would get from your mother in the form of love and breast milk and cuddles and connection and emotional reassurance, when that is very much set and secure, like when your mother is emotionally available and physically available, you grow up with the understanding that I am worthy and my needs are worthy and that I deserve to receive from the external world. Because also the first 6 months of your life, you can't actually dissociate the difference between you and your mother. Like you're still, it's why most babies' first words are dada, because it's actually the first external object they perceive outside of themselves, because they view themselves as part of mother. So if there's separations and things going on there, this can really, which for me is what happened at 6 months. My mum was really sick. She had another pregnancy. She had a lot of morning sickness. And it got to the point where I didn't even like recognize her when she held me. Like I had that much of a separation in the first 6 months. And it really instilled this sense of not always feeling worthy to be safe, like to stay in one place with my living situation, to be with one person, with romantic situations, with money. It always feels like the second that I get it, it doesn't feel safe to hold and it needs to be spent or it needs to go away again. So it was very, also because yesterday was a Cancer full moon, which is the topic of the mother. So it just feels like very appropriate that it's all coming up right now. So yeah, and I noticed in those questions that a lot of them were asking about shame. Like, if you didn't feel burdened by shame, how would your life and business look different? And that kind of question really moved me because I was like, fuck, I am actually ashamed a lot, even though that's a covering emotion, and we can talk about that a bit in a second. But yeah, I'm curious to open this a bit, the topics of shame, but also receiving and worthiness. I feel is very prevalent also amongst clients that I have, this feeling of like, am I worthy enough to be healthy and to be happy? And we try and like gaslight ourselves, like, yes, I'm thriving, I'm vital, I'm abundant, like all of these like manifesting, these statements, but they're kind of bypassing the thing that's keeping it in a loop, which is the shame often. So yeah, that's what's moving right now. Also, it's good to be back with you both on a podcast.
Yeah, good to have you back.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it's been a while since we had a episode with the three of us. So,
A menage a trois.
huh?
What's that?
I said a
What?
menage a trois. It's the French word for threesome. Carry on.
We don't know these kind of things.
I've never
Clearly.
heard that. That sounds fun. Going back to the topic of trauma, yeah, Ashley's cat is visiting today. Hello, little kitty. I want to briefly touch upon where toxic shame is coming from. Like the fundamental belief that something is wrong with you. So when we grow up, like Ashley said, we're dependent on our caregivers. And when our caregiver does something that is threatening our survival, then or is harmful or boundary crossing in any way, we cannot risk, as a child, you cannot risk saying that the caregiver did something bad, because that would mean the caregiver is not capable of providing for you. So what happens instead is, if the caregiver is not bad, if my mother is not bad for having done this and that, then it needs to be my fault, because in that way, the role of the mother in the mind of the child is still preserved. Like she is still that being that can provide for me, that is safe, and it's like an illusion of safety. Because yeah, what happens? We take that personally, and these feelings don't go away. So a lot of people are struggling with shame, and in emotional release, we call it almost like the black hole of emotions. It's like a magnet that has a lot of pull and is pulling our experience in. Like we are very active inner critics. We have a very low like muscle tonus. We are like in a fight or flight, in a fawn response. So basically for all of our lives, and this is sucking out the vitality and the richness and all of the different colors of life, not only happiness and joy, but also like it doesn't dim happiness and joy, or like the more quote unquote positive lively emotions. It's also making it way more difficult to experience sadness, let alone anger, because we feel like so bad about ourselves that yeah, we cannot afford having a connection. That's my murky attempt to describe shame. I was just wondering if I feel ashamed today. I think I just felt ashamed because I didn't like that explanation. And here's the cool point, because there's toxic shame, which is I'm a bad person, and there's also the shame of, I just described that, and I could say, oh, I'm a bad, I suck at this. I'm just a bad teacher, or like I'm a bad podcast host and just a bad person. Or I could say, oh yeah, that felt kind of that I wasn't living up to my standards, maybe in terms of explaining, and maybe I'm either looking at this topic again. Maybe next time I'm centering myself a bit more before I go into the podcast. So there's also this healthy sense of shame, that was just an example, a healthy sense of shame that is telling us where our limits are. Like, I'm not perfect, and that's a healthy thing to sometimes realize.
What would you say is the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame? Toxic shame in like when you actually practice it or experience it?
I think from the experience, it's relatively close to each other. I think toxic shame is more a fundamental belief that I am wrong. Like, no matter what I do, it's never enough. I don't deserve to be happy, and everything that I think or do is sucked in by this magnet of negativity. And I think like a healthy sense of shame is, for example, when I let's say I'm in a conflict with my partner, and I'm all of a sudden accidentally, something overcomes me, and I'm insulting her in a way that is not acceptable for me. I would feel ashamed in that moment, but that shame tells me, hey, that was that
Not
was
aligned with you, with your truth, with your values, maybe.
yes, it's something like, it's almost like my conscience is speaking in that moment, and it's like, yeah, I feel ashamed, and that tells me, like, the shame is speaking to me and telling me, hey, don't think that you're perfect in problem solving or in conflicts, because that you overstepped a line there, and maybe there's something you need to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like shame is an emotion that is created to make us function well in communities, in groups, in connection with others. So, and it only works in connection with others, right? We can't be ashamed if there's nobody else there. We're always ashamed because of the way we might seem to somebody else. So it's actually like, I always like to look at emotions in a way that I want to remember the root function of that emotion, and then you can find out what's actually the healthy function of it as well. So making you fit into a group, because of course, if you want to survive, you need to be in a group, or in the past at least, if you want to survive, you need to be in a group. And in order to work and to be in a group and to get accepted in that group, you need the shame. You need to see, what am I doing differently than others? How do I like stand out in negative ways, and like prevent that? Nowadays, a lot of people actually have a lot of shame, like too much of it, and then they need to work on like unshaming themselves, because it's not functioning, and they are repressing their authenticity and their truth, and that is actually really unhealthy. And of course, you can be much more individual now and still survive, and you can find the right peer group for you. But in the past, that was much more like difficult, and you needed to like fit in. So it's a really important function of the human being, so to say, to be able to recognize, how do I stand out? How am I different than others? How is my behavior different? So in order to function well and do the right things to fit into the group and get accepted, and you receive connection, and connection means you feel good and you survive. In the past, at least, it was very much related to survival. Now it's more related to getting your needs met.
I remember
Yeah.
reading, sorry, just adding on the societal thing, because it was like, healthy shame is basically what stops us from all being murderers and from obeying laws and for upholding some form of societal structure that we all agree to. There's two aspects on this. So I did a lot of the trainings online with David Bedrick, who works with unshaming. And I caught up with a video of it from a few days ago, and it links also kind of what Tim is saying as the example. If, say, you have an outburst, because David Bedrick works a lot with anger. If you have an outburst, we first and foremost shame that outburst, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm such a bad person for having lost control, and that in itself is like a way to avoid looking at like why we lost control. And that's what I notice also with shame, that it is indeed, we call it like inhibiting emotion if you're looking at the change triangle, or a covering emotion. And sometimes we get so stuck with the shame that we don't invite the opportunity to look deeper. So there was an example that he was giving where, hold on, let me get my memory right with this because it was like very specific. When you're in connection with people and there's somebody stepping over of your boundaries, and then oh no, I can't explain this very well right now. It'll come back in a second. It was basically that we like pathologize that anger or things like this are something that need to just be fixed, that we just put the shame on top of it, like when people meditate, just to like put the quick fix. You have an argument with some people and then you don't really resolve it because there's maybe shame about talking about why you're angry at the person or why they felt let down by them, and then people just kind of
Yes.
wait for things to blow over. And then they're like, yeah, we resolved it. It's like, no, you didn't. You just bypassed it. Like you just
Yeah,
avoided
yeah,
the
yeah.
confrontation of talking about it. So
Mm.
I I think I've said it already on this podcast, but I fundamentally love also his way of how he interacts and does demos with people because he's in the most unshaming way, allowing everything to be present in a very delicate, inviting manner. And that, even for me, having come from a background of chronic illness, was what I heard a lot also in myself. Like, I'm broken, I can't be fixed, you're broken, all this shame around like your body can't heal. That was this like toxic belief system that was running around in my mind. And actually like that was just stopping me from feeling underneath probably the sadness and the helplessness. Um,
Mhm.
it's a sneaky little bugger, as we would say in English, this emotion of shame. It's like, look over here, look at this. But really it's you need to go look at what's on the other side underneath it. So
Yeah, I loved what you just shared about shame being sort of a lid that prevents us from going deeper. Like I'm having an angry outburst and I'm like, oh, that felt bad. And I'm like, oh, let's push it away. Let's push it away. That's a bad thing to do, blah, blah, blah. And that's a really interesting point that actually prevents me from understanding and being compassionate also towards myself. Like shame can, I just learned that shame can is linked to like some defense mechanisms, for example, rationalization. Like, oh, I feel ashamed of this, and I sort of have to explain my way into believing that it's okay to have that. But I'm losing touch with the somatics and the actual root cause of what's going on, or not even the root cause, but just my experience. It's like I'm explaining my way out of my experience.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
rejecting it.
Interesting.
Like
Yeah.
the also that sometimes when people say this phrase like I'm still XYZ,
Yes, yes.
still, like without even realizing, we're shaming ourselves for being in that state, and by default means not experiencing the state. So he gave this amazing example of this woman who's like, I've done 10 years of therapy and I'm still angry and I still can't move. And he's like, okay, like he did what we would do in a session, like, tell me, how does this anger look like? What kind of, if this was a person, what would it look like? Or if it's a shape, a color, like guiding that way. And she was like, I don't really know. And he's like, the sheer aspect of shaming about being in a state stopped this woman from actually
Mm.
being in connection with it, which a simple I can't believe she would have been 10 years in therapy, but this is why we know talk therapy doesn't always work and you need to go in the somatics route. That the simple aspect of connecting to the sensation and that experience means that she can define it, means that she can relate with it, means that it's already moving. So it was yeah, a lot of knowledge bombs dropping in about shame.
Mm. Yeah,
Jannick,
Yeah,
and
what's
yeah.
you?
Jannick, go on.
I just want to share that I like what Tim just said about how shame is almost like a counterforce to self-compassion. And self-compassion is usually what's healing, is
Mhm.
because if you are in a compassionate state, you approach yourself, your patterns, your behavior, whatever it is, with love and understanding, and you are connected to truth, because the truth is that none of the things you're doing because you're a bad person. You're doing them because this is the best way you know. And you had to adapt as a child, like Tim explained at the beginning, as a child, and to create this kind of part of you or this behavior. And then you are living in a lie. When you shame it, you are lying, because it is not something to shame. It is something to be compassionate about. And counterintuitively, that is the thing that will also free you. But we think moving away from it frees us. And the shame is moving away from it, like we just shared. But it's the compassion is moving towards it, is what heals it. And the first step for me, like, and I want to go over to some more like practical approaches that people can use if they actually are dealing and struggling with shame, is to acknowledge that you are ashamed. Already saying, like, so many people are not doing that. You are ashamed and you don't tell. Let's say you're with your partner. A lot of times that is the situation where shame can come up, because you want to be attractive to them. You want to be, or to in front of your friends or business partners or whatever. But let's stick to the example of the partner. You want to be attractive, so some things that are part of you are ashamed of, and you think if you share them, then that's bad. That'll make you unattractive, and you lose connection, and you're afraid of losing connection. In that moment, you are not connected to the truth that actually being authentic is the best thing you can do in any relationship, of course, because otherwise you take away the chance to be loved the way you are. And so by just saying that out loud, being like, right now, I'm really ashamed to share this with you. I'm not even going to share this with you now, but I just want to share with you, I'm really ashamed. And boom, already makes space, creates space. And the next thing maybe you can do is, like Ashley said, connect with the somatics. How does shame feel in your body? Can you create even more space for the sensation in your body of shame? And then you can watch the episode that we did last week, I think, with Tim, about some existential kink. You can even embrace the feeling of shame. You can be like, ooh, is there something juicy about the shame in your body, the somatics? Is it, if you take away the story, just be with the sensation, can I enjoy it? And you de-armor, basically. You take away all the weapons from the shame, you make it less and less powerful, and you open a new pathway where it's possible for you to share the thing that you are ashamed of. That is something that I know works really well. And maybe you guys have other approaches that how to deal with shame.
I like that a lot, because you with what you just shared, it feels like when you do that, you treat yourself as if you had value, as if you were worthy of compassion. And that's like the trickster aspect of shame, is like, it's always like nagging you into thinking that you don't deserve to be happy. When good things happen to you, immediately there's a voice that says, no, that's not really for you. Or like on even on a deeper energetic level, when Ashley talked about money, it's like, I don't really deserve that money. And what you just shared, Jannick, is so potent, I think, because it flips the script. And I think it starts with, just like you shared, it starts with consciousness. It starts with recognizing, oh, I just noticed, like, in a subtle way, maybe in my language pattern, that there might be some shame. I feel that, for example, and that makes total sense with what Ashley. That's why it was so insightful for me. Makes total sense with what you shared, Ashley. That whenever, like, often when I experience stress, my first response is to do something about it, or to, I don't know, take a cold shower, or just do something. And I didn't know until now that instead of doing that, I can also take the time and really check in with that feeling. Like, cognitively, I know that. I've learned that. I'm doing it with my clients all the time. But this shame aspect is so sneaky, because it's almost like an uncontrolled trickster that is always like sneaking back in. Like, this belief system, it feels like it's always active. And that's also one of the differences of toxic and healthy shame. Toxic shame is stretched over a long period of time, and it's like always subtly there. Healthy shame is usually in like specific moments. I feel like it's this script that is always running in the background and just waiting for a moment to latch on. And it does that in a way that is very hard to be conscious of it. And that's, at the same time, that's the task. And then to have like maybe the skills, or the compassionate posture towards yourself to flip that script around.
Yeah, it's having also the time or the space to catch it. This morning I received a session from a colleague from Emotional Releases, and she was saying also that it's when for a lot of people, some of this work who are really new, they're going in and noticing sensations and noticing talking to the parts can be very helpful. But also if you're more advanced down this line, it's like a devil's circle because your mind is already a few steps ahead of where you think the process should be. And then there's like you're trying to catch the shame, but it's like your knowledge and experience and ability to guide other people gets in the way of also sometimes really being able to like we've just like outsmarted ourselves in a way through going too niche into this. And something that for me is like a very helpful practice because you can go always, like you can go with breath stuff, with embodiment stuff, voice things. For me, what was really helpful at the beginning of this, and I was like looking through different exercises for shame because I'm doing a workshop in a few weeks with Tori, who's going to be a guest on the podcast soon. And a simple thing for me was mirror conversations. So talking to myself when topics of, let's say, like the toxic shame, these like core fundamental beliefs that are not serving me in my like health or my wealth and my well-being, and actually sitting and talking to myself in the mirror, like that reassuring self, like you're doing your best, like you are worthy. Like these things can feel so simple, but they're very intense for people to do as an exercise because then all the masks are off because you're literally looking at yourself and it's almost like doing parts work because there's that distance and it's yeah, I guess you call it like compassionate mirror talks or something.
I think mirror work is like a category of that. That reminds me of another thing that John Bradshaw, who wrote a brilliant book on shame. It's called The Shame That Binds Us. He had an exercise where he prompted the readers to just voice what the inner critic, like that shaming part, is saying. And it sounds so counterintuitive, but I really urge you to try it because when I'm really deep into my like when my inner critic is really, really loud and really insulting towards me, sometimes I just say it out loud. I go on a walk and I pretend I'm on the phone. That's how I do things. And I'm basically walking through the streets insulting myself. But that brings that sort of disenchants the shaming part. It brings it into the real world, and just with the mirror work, you listen to yourself, and you're like, oh yeah, but wait a second, that makes no sense. That's totally a you problem, dear shaming part. And then you can like engage with it, and then also like be compassionate towards yourself. So I think, yeah, it's all about catching yourself in that process and then getting towards a more compassionate stance.
I have a question because I know someone's listening to this and they might go do the walking in the park thing. I mean, you're also allowed to just speak out loud. Like there's no, if society shames you, Tim, for talking to yourself in a park, it's also but like I can imagine if someone's like, okay, I would do that, but then it would like get even darker. Like maybe they don't hear the ridiculousness. It like reaffirms again and again like the toxic feeling of the statements. What would you advise if someone gets to that point? I mean, in a way, it's uncovered what's underneath, which could be like, fuck, I feel really sad about this, and this is really horrible that I think all of these things, which I guess is the medicine. But I know that someone might be like, even I would be like, I don't think it's healthy to around the park and say all the things in my head that are present because especially someone with a background of like depression or with suicidal ideations, like it could feel like a very slippery slope to open that box. I don't know if you guys have like how this can be done where that fear, which also needs to be looked at, is present as well.
I would enter a part style. Like first of all, if you have suicidal ideations and you're depressed, seek help. So this is not, I'm not saying this to cure anything. These are more, hints and tools for your toolbox. Usually it decreases the pressure to say these things out loud, also with the intention of what's it called, unblending with that shaming part and just listen to it to get some off. And if that and that usually naturally ends up in some sort of parts dialogue where you listen and you come from a place of self-compassion, and you engage with that part. You engage with that part. Like, why do you actually like really confront that part? Oh, you think I'm a piece of shit. Why do you think that? Yeah, it's because you did this and that. And why would make that? Why would it make me a piece of shit? Isn't that irrational? Isn't that makes no sense to me? Why doesn't that make me a person that makes mistakes, or even someone that is learning? Or why are you so harsh? Like, really challenge that inner critic. Really important, and that's also where anger comes to play, where it's like anger is not just an outward energy of I'm setting boundaries and things. It's also like I know my worth and I'm going to protect it. Like, I don't accept that someone else talks to me like that, and I don't accept my inner critic or my shaming part talking to me like that. It's like, no, I reject that. I don't want this.
There's a phrase, like thing on Instagram where people are like, we listen and we don't judge. You can just do that with your inner parts as well. Yeah. Jannick, how's this moving things for you? Hey, I'm always going to bring some brain rot into these episodes as well.
Brain rot?
Yeah, it's just the word for things you see and hear on the internet that like stick in your mind.
Yeah, so I liked what Tim shared about how it's a constant shame is a constant thing, right? So this is also my experience, is that this voice, this shame, is constantly speaking. So if you want to make it conscious, it needs to be something somatic, something that you can actually feel in your body that is constantly speaking to you. So you could take a moment and like take some time, set aside some time, and then explore, where is the shame in my body? Maybe think of something that you are ashamed of, and then you should probably feel some sensations in your body, and this is the shame speaking, telling you this is wrong. Like, find your own words, find the things that resonate with you. And it's constantly there. It's like, this is wrong, or you are wrong for doing this, for having this, for being like this. And it speaks to you. And it's not about doing something with it. It's really about processing these sensations. So you can just be with it and like, let it speak. So what I want to add to what Tim shared and what Ashley asked is, yes, of course, you can go into like cycles of just insulting yourself more and more and more and more, and then you get into this negative state or negative energy. But if you allow it to not come from you, but come from the shame, it's like you let the shame speak to you. And it's like, what are you saying? Like, I'm here to listen to you. And you stay connected. And like Tim said, unblended, you stay connected to yourself, and you act as if you are listening to a part of you that has a lot to say. And then when you are in this state of unblendedness, of like connection with yourself, with your true self, and not that ashamed part, then you are able to also see how ridiculous it is, the things that it's saying. And one thing that really helps me as well, something practical, is imagine somebody else that you really like or really love would have done what you have done, would have be the way you are, like this attribute. Would you be able to be compassionate with them? Like, how would you treat them? How would you treat them if they did the thing or were like the thing that you experience and that you feel ashamed of? And it's an easy technique to bring in some compassion for yourself, because that makes you notice how fucking strict you are with yourself, and how actually there is a place of compassion for this exact thing inside of you. You're just not applying it right now on yourself.
And that I love what you say. It also takes time. sometimes. Like this isn't just like, oh, I listened to the podcast once, I tried it, and now I'm compassionate. Like even Jannick talking, and I'm like playing this in my head, like how it would be, and I'm like, no, my inner critic would be equally as harsh to the people that I love because they're like all of these things coming up. So it's the continual practice to catch it
Yeah.
first. And even if it's like a micro shift, when you were asking about where you feel it in your body, I often get this feeling of like kind of like a kick in the gut, like in the solar plexus, but also like a heaviness on the chest. And it kind of sometimes feels like a boot, like a shoe, a big shoe. And it reminds me of this meme where you see like a little kid on the ground and he's getting like stood on by a boot, but then you zoom out and his hand is in the boot when you like you realize that you are the creator of your own problems.
Wow.
Maybe we can like add it in on the edit. It's
I
really
like
That
that.
sounds accurate.
So that's what it reminded me of it. It's like, oh, I'm the one actually putting this here in a way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tim?
I feel this. We talked about nourishment as well and being nourished and the feminine, and I feel or this mother energy, and I feel when this shameful part is active, it almost feels like it depletes us with life force energy, and I feel like what compassion does is it reconnects us. It brings us to a state where we are safe enough within ourselves to meet these emotions within ourselves and to nourish ourselves. Actually, when I feel fully nourished, I don't feel like I need so much because I feel like I'm okay the way I am. Maybe not perfect, maybe not grandiose, best guy ever, whatever. I'm good at some things. Have realistic self-image. I'm okay. When I'm in that state, I feel relaxed, and I literally like not only emotional nourishment, but I notice myself I'm consuming less because, or I'm consuming less. I don't need as much validation from the outside. I don't fill myself. I don't need to fill myself with validation. And when I feel ashamed, and when I feel like, oh fuck, these voices are there and I believe them, and I'm like in this contracted state, I feel like I need way more stimulation. I tend to my addictive patterns tend to show up more. I need more validation from the outside, and there's nothing wrong with validation. Again, validation is we all need validation. It's about the energy behind that depletedness, that it's almost like I feel hollow or something. I need people to mirror me and to tell me that I'm okay the way I am, which is also a natural thing. But again, it's this shameful energy that depletes me in these moments.
Yeah, I like that. And I have a question for you, Tim, because what I've been thinking about is you are in this state like of needing something, right? Some people might call it needy. It's like depleted. It's like give me, give me, give me because I don't have enough. Now, how much reassurance from the outside is healthy? And how much do you need to reassure yourself or give yourself that nurturance? I find it really hard to sometimes find the balance, because you could always go, let's say, to your partner or to whoever you think can give you what you need in that moment and be like, oh, I feel so depleted right now. I need your love. I need your love. Please, like, tell me that you love me. Tell me that I'm great. Tell me that I'm doing well, whatever. And you like me with this or that. Or like, do you need to be like, oh no, I'm actually, this is not good. This is the needy energy right now. I shouldn't go to my partner. And I'm like, give it to myself, like look at myself, nurture myself with self-compassion.
But that is the thing, like in how you say about it's like a tricky thing, because the way you just talked about it, I shouldn't be needy. It sounds like it's so with what I'm saying, I wasn't trying to shame the neediness, because that's also what could happen. Like if you like the it's like people talk so much about unconditional love and acceptance, and it's really about whatever I do, whatever I say, if I'm needy, if I'm too tired, if I'm not talkative, if I talk a lot, whatever, I'm fundamentally good the way I am. So it's not even about it almost sounded like neediness is a problem to solve, but neediness, and that's what we talked about before, if we don't shame it and we look at the neediness, we can get a level deeper and we can get in touch with what lies behind the neediness. And then it's not needy, because I haven't used that word in ages because I don't like it. I don't like calling people needy because it has this slight like accusatory, in like it's almost like a light insult. You're so needy.
Yeah.
It's almost like, ugh.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you're disgusted by that.
There's this comparison of like if someone walks through the desert for 3 days and then they finally arrive at a village and they're like, I'm so thirsty, give me water. People would be like, you're too thirsty. You're too
You're
thirsty.
too needy.
And it's like, yeah. And then it's like people
Okay.
say, you're too needy. Like they've never received love from their mother and their child, and they walk around and they want the love, and they're like, and people are like, you're too needy, bro. No, you're too needy. Like, what the fuck? It's just, it hasn't been nurtured. So of course that's something that they would want. And yes, you're right. I can sense that in myself, that I'm ashamed of neediness and I'm judging it. So you recognize that in the way I asked the question.
It'd be interesting as the person making the statement, like you're too needy, to be aware enough to catch it. Because I mean, I'm pretty certain all three of us at certain points in our lives have made that statement about other people and like felt the repulsion of like, ugh, get away, you're gonna take something, I don't want that. And noticing where that's probably more just a case of like coming back to your own boundaries and your own like taking space without blaming the other person for being the culprit of that in a way. Like it's your fault that I feel disgusting right now. It's like you're making me feel nauseated. I know that came up for me a lot in like many connections. The sense of like shaming someone for just like being the way they are because of their upbringing and things like that. Not like directly, because it's just the neediness that your whole body is rejecting that experience. But I
Yeah,
mean, Tim and I
but
like, with
neediness,
colleagues and things like this, like we really like you just don't want to be around the person.
yeah.
And you just like, yeah.
Oftentimes neediness doesn't make other people feel good in their bodies, actually makes them feel bad in their body. And then I think it is important to us like to be able to say no to somebody who's needy and or depleted of love. We can find different vocabulary, and also unshame that how it makes you feel in your body, because probably one part of it is that you are needy yourself and you don't admit it and you don't want to see it, so you shame it in the other person. That might be a part of you feeling uncomfortable with somebody else being really needy, and I've experienced that with myself. So like basically shadow neediness is a shadow, or depletion of love is a shadow in that case. And of course, we want to be just like naturally want to be with people who feel full of love. It makes us feel good to be around people who feel full. And it doesn't make us feel so good to be around people who don't feel full. And you can say no to that and be like, no, right now, sorry, like I can't be with that energy. And I know some part of it is also me and I have to work on myself, but for now, it's just a no. And you acknowledge that and you unshame that as well. That you don't need to be that always compassionate person, or I wouldn't even say that, because you can say no and have compassion for that person. So really like look precisely what's happening inside of you when you say no. Where's your part? Where's your own shadow? Are you in compassion saying no, compassion with yourself and that person, or just coming from a place of go away, I don't want that, I want to deal with my own topics? And make the like unshame the no as well. It's okay if you don't want to be with them, even if you're not fully healed yet, and you should be in a state where you can have compassion, but right now you can't, that's okay as well.
But I also think with that, should like it's sort of like a thing that I've also heard Gabor Mate talk about very frequently, is that people are rejecting that like should in general, like you shouldn't say should. It's almost like, yeah, I never say should. And I feel like this is also like a healthy aspect of shame. If my room looks like an absolute mess, if I've eaten chicken burgers for 5 days, for the past 5 days, and I haven't showered, And a voice inside of me, like this is, I'm just, it's obviously,
Hypothetically.
Absolutely.
Show us your room, Tim.
imagine, close your eyes, imagine that. And there's a voice inside of you that says, you should probably change something. That is your conscience also speaking, like your healthy sense of shame. That's what I just thought about, because I'm really aware in the past, because I've learned that my conscience is as close to it's getting really grandiose now. Prepare the voice of God, because my conscience, which tells me you should stop doing that and you should rather do that. And when I have like an icky feeling of, oh, that wasn't, fuck, I feel bad because I didn't do that. Maybe if I unshame that, it becomes, like for me personally, and also from the literature I read about it, it becomes a guide towards me feeling incongruence with the flow of life. And that is a voice that is talking a lot about in shoulds. That is, you could say, like shaming me. It creates a tension in my body, but the tension is not resolved through necessarily through saying, "Oh, I'm good the way I am. I don't need to clean my room. I don't need to do this. I don't, I'm already like perfect." It's like it creates tension because it tells you things that want to be resolved, that want to be worked on. So I find that healthy sense of shame and that notion also that sometimes you really should do things because deep down they are good for you. And I feel like differentiating between conscience and toxic shame and inner critic is really difficult, and maybe the task of a lifetime. I just wanted to bring that in because I find that distinction very important, because it's sort of the masculine part to that whole discussion. The one is nourishment in the form of unshaming, in the form of, yes, you're good the way you are, and flipping the script in that way. And the other is like, yes, you're good the way you are, and because of that, I'm going to tell you how a person, how you need to behave in order to feel really good about yourself and to feel really centered. And that's more like the masculine aspect of it.
Yeah.
This is like really, you hear this a lot when people talking about like what makes a successful, wealthy business person is that when they made mistakes or they had failures, they didn't get stuck on shaming themselves for it or the emotional attachment, and they moved on to take it as a lesson and take it as information and to take it as like how to do differently and to continue onwards, like the way to evolve as opposed to getting so stuck on the emotions of it. It's like in reality, and I definitely have used this example before, but that video of the therapist who's just like, just stop it, like get over it. Like in some shape or form, that healthy dad energy, masculine energy is kind of needed. Like stop it and keep going, you're good. It's like the healthy balance between
Yes.
that. Like we can get lost, and I love that you brought in the masculine and feminine elements, because we can get lost in that of like the fluffiness and the softness, and it really just depends on your upbringing and what works and what resonates with yourself. But it's also okay to have some sternness and some like, you're good, like learn, take this as a lesson. Let's move on to the next step. What can you take from there? How did it help you grow? How can you honor what just happened without getting sucked into the vortex and black hole of having 5 chicken burgers and not showering for 5 days and things?
Yeah.
Yeah, you also have a choice of how deep you get into that narrative and how complex you want things to be. It's like, is it like a massive shadow problem that you need to resolve, or maybe you just, maybe you're just derailed and maybe you literally just stop and move on. It's like, and deciphering these things is not so easy.
Yeah.
Guys, we're
And
out of a job.
once
Stop
you
it.
stop it, that's it. Once you stop it and you do something different, then this creates a new resource for you again. Like it's like you do something different and it works, and you're like, yo, I'm amazing. I can use that resource to meet my shame and not let the shame be so dramatic. And I feel like what Tim just said about cleaning the room, again, this is similar to what you shared earlier about the difference between toxic and healthy shame. In this case, it's really coming from a place of self-worth. I'm like, I'm worthy of a clean room. What the fuck am I doing here? I want a clean room. I don't want this. This is not aligned with me and with who I am. So yes, in order to be myself and get what I deserve, I should clean my room now. And you're doing it from a place of self-love and alignment. And once I heard this nice comparison between the masculine and the feminine way of love, and for me, yeah, I really like this. And in that case, it was the feminine love standing for unconditional love. So I love you no matter what. And the masculine love is do it. I love you no matter how it turns out, but do it. So it's this like it's pushing you into doing it because you are worth of like trying. We are here to do stuff and to be active. It's like an active approach. And it's not about like you have to win on the like at it. Like I'll be there in your wins and I'll be there in your losses, but do it. And like to get that fatherly support and to give that to yourself as well. And that in that case means maybe you're gonna fail at cleaning the room, or maybe whatever it is, that why you are not cleaning your room. And maybe you'll be sad afterwards, or maybe whatever it is you're coping, with not having a clean room. But I'll be there with you, but do it. I'll be there with you, but do it. And I really like this as the father energy.
Yes, super powerful. Like I really enjoy how we got to that like holistic picture of masculine and feminine ways of dealing with with the topic of shame. I feel like this was a really uh, wholesome and really dynamic episode, and I think we could even wrap it up here. I would say we all enjoyed being the three of us again. I can't even remember when the last time was that we spoke together. I'm over dramatizing the whole thing, but it feels like a
2 weeks ago.
long time. It's like in the past we've been sort of scattered. Sometimes it was just Jannick and Ashley. Sometimes it was Jannick and me. And I feel like it feels good to be back on track with some juicy conversations. And yeah, I would say we wrap it up here. We'll see you next week. And I leave the last words to Jannick and Ashley.
I just want to say, if you like this episode, please let us know in the comments. And like this episode, give us 5-star rating on your favorite podcast hosting platform. And yeah, try what we shared here with you. This is where the juice is. This is where change comes from. It's not from consuming stuff. It's a nice start, but it's when you apply things that real change happens. So I invite you to do so. And thank you so much, Tim, for that amazing wrap up. It was fun for me as well to be with you guys today.
Yeah. I also want to add, if you have topics or things that you want us to talk about, we'll also write this as a comment, because maybe you don't stay to the last minute of the episode. But if there's questions you have, things that you don't know how to navigate, topics you want us to talk about, to unpick with our minds, then please comment that, because it helps us to
Yes.
make more episodes. And if there's guests or people that you want us to speak with, then also please send them our way.
I like that. All right, guys. See you next week and
Ciao, ciao.
enjoy your day. Bye bye.
Bye bye.